Be sure to check out my store for the stuff I use and templates at a low cost, and get my everything pack so you can have everything in my store at a reduced cost, less than $20 if you tweet it out. What's up guys, Qehzy here bringing you guys another tutorial, and we're going to actually be creating this final piece. So we went over a couple things already, and I have those things already inserted here, minus this background, so that you'll already know this kind of stuff. So this is like the lighting on him, or the object, whatever you're using, the lighting, and then the color correction. So let's just get right into it. We want to start with the background, and you just want to use some sort of background. I always use a background. I think just creating your own kind of takes a lot of time, and a lot of times I personally can't get it right, so I like to use an image that relates to the piece. So I've had my recording has crashed like two times already, and I lost the original image of the stadium. So I'm going to be using Old Trafford, obviously. And the effects I did on this was just a Gaussian blur of about 7 or 8 radius. And then I set it to 20% opacity. And then the next step I did was filter, distort, displace, 25 horizontal scale, okay. And then I used a displacement map I have. And if you don't have any displacement maps, you can just Google displacement maps, Photoshop, and these two images will come up. You just want to bring them to Photoshop and save them as PSDs somewhere on your computer and have them. So I'm going to be using the second one, and you just click open, and then you should get this sort of effect, and that's what I'm going to be using. And I'm just going to set that back to 20, and now we can actually get into it. Hopefully this recording doesn't crash again. But on that layer, we want to create a layer mask. Go to the gradient tool, which should be by the paint bucket tool. If that's up, just get the gradient tool. You want the second one, which will be a color to transparent, and just make sure you have black up, so it's black to transparent. Then we want to click from the bottom, make sure you have the layer mask selected over here, not this guy, and click, hold shift, drag up almost to the top, but stop somewhere close, and you get a nice gradient like that. And I'm just going to try to move through this quickly to get through the recording crashing and stuff. So you can add some background stuff. What I did was add a Man U logo, and let me just bring this up here. I did also add a De Gea in the background, but I'm not going to go through that just because it's extra time. You guys kind of understand the point with what I'm doing with this. So I've just dragged that logo on here, and I'm just going to bump up the size and center it best I can. And I'm going to do Command U and bring up the lightness so it's completely white, and set it to overlay. Now this will look pretty good, but we want to bump down the opacity to about 40, somewhere in that range, because it's a little too overpowering. And what I did originally was erase this left side, so get the eraser tool, bump up the size, and just erase it. And then I added a De Gea here, and I literally didn't change anything about the second De Gea. I just searched up De Gea, drug on a picture of him like yelling, like looking fierce, put it in the background at like 7% opacity, so you barely could see it, and that's all I did for that. But let's just keep moving on. So we want to create a new layer, get the brush tool. You want to have white up this time, and you want to get a particle brush. So obviously I mentioned in the last tutorial you can just look up particle brushes and find a ton. I'm going to be using one that I showed off before that I was going to use, but it was the wrong one in the last tutorial, and so it's this guy right here. And we're just going to make the size like somewhere in 1,000, and just kind of click around like so. And obviously this is a little too overpowering with some of these straight bits, so I'm just going to get the eraser tool and erase some of them. Just click around like so. So we get some particles like that are kind of choppy but look pretty cool. We're going to set that to 16% opacity. And you can barely see that, but it's a good subtle effect. And then we're going to create a new one. Do the same thing with this brush to the right of it, somewhere in like the 1,000 range. We'll do 1,400, and we'll click around here and create some more particles. And get the eraser tool and erase some of the overpowering bits like that. And do the same thing, set it to like 16% opacity. You can add a blur on those if they're too overpowering or whatever. So like filter blur, Gaussian blur, and do like 3 or 4 probably would look alright. And yeah, so that's just a subtle little more particles you want in there. It looks pretty good. Now we want to add some smokestacks. So all you need to do for this is just search smokestacks, and there's a bunch to work with. The second one I think looks good, so I'm just going to use that. I used about 3 or 4 different variations, but I'm just going to use one during this, obviously for time purposes and to make sure this doesn't crash. So we're going to set that to lighten, and get the eraser tool or whatever and erase the side bits that are straight. And now this is a little too overpowering here. It's a little too white. So we're just going to bump down or erase that a little bit. And we're going to set the opacity to about 25% or somewhere in that range. You can see it's just a subtle smoke effect, which looks really sweet with this, with like the red. And it's kind of like a hell themed thing because of Man United. But we can duplicate that and put it around other places, and I like to have it around lighting sources, so like over here to the left, and then we'll put one over here to the right. Obviously I'd probably use some different ones to get some variations, and this one probably bump down the opacity because it's a little too overpowering. And yeah, we could add probably more around here, but it's good enough for tutorial purposes. Now we want to go ahead to our main object, and we're going to duplicate it and bring it to the top like so, and then we're going to duplicate it again, and we're going to use some more, or those displacement maps again. So this top one, let's go to filter, distort, displace, 25, okay, and let's go ahead and select the first one, which is this guy, which hopefully you've made these displacement maps already. Then let's go to that second one and do the same thing but use the other displacement map, this one. And with that second one, we're going to use the arrow keys and just move it over to the left. That might be a little too far, but let's hide that for now. Go to the top one, get the eraser tool, and we're going to erase the left side. So we're going to keep the bits on the right side. So we want a little bit on the jersey. We'll do like that and like that. I don't like any on the face because I think it looks weird, but I'll keep a little bit at the neck so it kind of looks like it's little bit of smoke, I don't know, looks kind of cool. And then we'll make the brush a little smaller and erase down the sleeve like so, on the glove. Maybe erase that. There we go. So that looks alright. The lighting might screw up some bits, like this is a little too overpowering, but I don't know, it looks cool. And if the main object is running or moving, it looks really sweet. I think that's when it looks the best. When someone's standing still like this, kind of looks like but I mean, I think it works in this case because we're going to be doing 2. So let's just go ahead and do this other one and erase the right side this time and erase most of the face again. And let's come down, and I'm going to leave a little bit in the middle here just because I think it looks pretty neat on the Chevy logo. And let's get the arm out of the way like that. And there we go. So that looks pretty cool. You can play around with this, obviously make it look a little better. You can actually make it blend in with the jersey a lot better. Like if I didn't have this lighting, you can see it looks much better. But I just left the lighting on because I think it looked good and it wasn't too bad on the original. Like down here, that's kind of bothering me actually. So I'm going to try to get rid of that. There we go. We'll just leave it up there. Not too bad. Now I showed this in the lighting bit, so let's get the brush and the soft brush, and we're going to add some lighting streaks. So the brush is going to be around 100. We want it to be white, and I went from the top before, but I'm going to go from the side this time. And these don't have to be perfectly straight. They can actually be pretty crappy. It doesn't really matter. So something like this works. You can do whatever. They can be sloppy. I always just do the first try. Just go boom, boom, boom. And then add a huge blur on them. So like close to 30. Like that. Boom. Okay. Set that to overlay. And you can see that looks alright. It's not like doesn't stand out too much. But there's definitely an effect there that I think looks cool. Obviously on the actual object I don't want any because I think it ruins the object itself, so I'm going to erase those bits, but leave it in the background and on top of everything. You could just drag it down below the De Gea. For whatever reason I didn't, so that's why that's there. Oh man, sorry. Now we want to create a little bit of blackness towards the bottom. So let's get the brush tool, a soft brush, and we're going to make sure we have black. And this is just to make the Qehzy blend in a little more. It stands out way too much, like it needs to blend in a little more with the background. So with that black brush, we're just going to go across the bottom, and this will make it look like there's something sort of in front of him down below, like fog or something, especially when we add more effects coming up here. So yeah, I don't change anything with that. I just have that nice little black bit on the bottom, which should darken up the bottom, because I like that dark to bright gradient sort of throughout the whole piece, and you'll see I'll do more with that later on. So now let's actually do some of the fog. So let's create a new layer, filter, make sure you have black and white up as your colors, render, and clouds. And then we want to set this to screen, and you can go to filter, blur, Gaussian blur, and this you can actually play around with. So this actually doesn't look too bad, but I think it's a little too much. We'll do like 7. That will do. And we'll bring down the opacity quite a bit, somewhere in the teens most likely, so it's not too standouty. But you can see, I just really like that look. You can see it kind of creates like a fog over everything. And with the smoke and the particles, it just really blends this together. And it especially fits like the devil theme. But it really works with anything. I've seen plenty of people use it on most of their projects, really. It looks really good in my opinion. Now, that's basically the main parts that you're going to want to do most often, or at least try to do for most pieces you're working on, in my opinion. Like, this is a new technique that I developed, but in everything I've done since I've developed it, I've used it in every project, which is very, like huge variation in projects, from headers to wallpapers to illustrations and stuff. So, like, those are 3 pretty different things, and I've used these techniques in all of them, like the final piece. Like, obviously the illustration, you don't use them, but yeah, whatever, I'm just kind of rambling. But you can add some more dust or like particle stocks. I have some from my pack that I used in this, but since you guys probably won't have it, you'll have to buy that if you want it. There's plenty of particle stocks out there, and like dust stocks that have like glares. You can actually probably search up dust and probably find some good ones to use. But I just put one on and put it at like 30% opacity, and that just added a little more. So we actually got stocks. That's not cool, but yeah, you get the gist of that. But let's get right into like the text and the final sort of touches. So let's get the text tool, and let's get white here, and let me just hide that. And we're gonna go in the middle here, and this is where you want your main text to be. So I could have put Qehzy here, but I put the wall. So obviously you can do whatever you like. I'm gonna center it, and I'm gonna use this font called Road Rage, which you can just get from DeFont most likely, and it's kind of like a handwritten, kind of aggressive font, like so. But I think it really fits this theme, and we're gonna just bring that down to somewhere in the teens, maybe the 20s. Let's try 20. Yeah, that should work. And leave it like that. Put it at the bottom, and then you can add logos and things, whatever. I obviously added my design by Qehzy over here to the left with like a little less opacity and all that jazz. But again, kind of said this with the dust stocks. You could add, that sounds like dust stocks like the Pokemon, but it's dust stocks. You could add 1 or 2 if you want, just to add a little more particles or whatever you want. Really, it doesn't make a difference actually if we just compare these two. They're pretty similar. You can kind of see more brushes over here. That's mainly it. That's pretty identical. Little darker on the front. You can see when I went over with that black brush on the bottom, I was a little closer. But that's about it. Everything else looks pretty similar. The smokestocks are a little different. But for the final touches, then when you're finally finishing up, I actually don't think this has any of the final touches. This is like the standard. So to do the final touches, I know I keep rambling. We're going to duplicate this whole folder. So Command J, Command E to merge it all, Command J to duplicate it again, filter, blur, Gaussian blur, somewhere in between 5 and 8 probably. Let's try 6. I think that'll work. You want to do a blur, click OK, get the eraser tool, make sure you don't have caps lock on like myself, and we're going to erase the main bit of De Gea, and any text you want to make sure you have that out so you can read it. And let's go ahead and erase around his arms. I like to leave the edges a little blurry. I think that gives a really cool look, like so. And then you can go and just kind of click around the outside to get rid of some blurs there so you can see the particles a little better. But you get something like that. I think that looks really neat. You can see with and without it. Looks pretty cool. And then we can select both of those, duplicate them, Command E, then filter, sharpen more, and you can see that just cleans everything up. If it's a little too overpowering, which I think this one is, you can bump down the opacity. And then the final thing, which I recommend everyone does for every project, is create a new layer. And I actually don't think this is on the original one. And then go to Filter, Noise, Add Noise. Oh shoot, I didn't fill it in. Let's get a black and fill it in black, and then Filter, Noise, Add Noise. You can change this around if you want. I'm just gonna leave it as a standard. Okay. Set it to screen. You can see that just makes it a lot cooler, and let's bring down the opacity, and that will finish it off. So that is how to do this. I think in the next one we're going to be doing an advertisement or something. If there's only 3 up right now, that's because the advertisement one I'm working on because school's coming up and all that jazz. Hopefully this wasn't too crazy though. Hopefully you guys got the point of it and learned something. I've just been trying to rush it so this recording doesn't crash again because that's super annoying. But be sure to follow me on Twitter @Qehzy, subscribe to my channel, which is That's Qehzy, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.